Good morning, Journey. It's great to see everybody this morning. We had a special little guest. Wonder Woman came by today to see everybody. So, hope you guys had a great week this week. We had a Gwen moment this week that I thought just kind of summed up our whole week. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm Christian. This is my wife, Heidi, and this is our little one, Gwen. She's so close to crawling. She'll get up on those hands, almost on those knees, but she just toys with us, you know? And we were in her room and we were trying to get her to crawl to this little dog thing, and she's sitting there and she's getting closer, and we can tell she's about to move, and then she shoves herself backwards, and then she does it again, and pretty soon she's like 3 feet further away from where she was trying to go. So that's about how I feel like our week went. We are moving. It may not be the direction we meant to, but we are moving, and maybe that's enough this week. So hopefully you guys had one just the same or better. As far as announcements go, we got several this morning, so buckle up. Here we go. Community groups are going every Wednesday right now, still at 6:45. If you guys have not done a community group here at Journey, I really, really recommend it, guys. I know when me and Heidi were first getting involved here at Journey, especially because we got started during COVID time, it was just a great way to meet people, to get to know each other, to really walk in life with our church family. And then just it really challenged us and grew us in ways I don't think either of us ever expected. So I would really recommend that if you guys can make that work, find a time to do that. If you guys have questions about that, feel free to talk to Bill and Julie Baker. You guys want to raise your hands? There they are. They're the experts on this. So feel free to talk to them if you guys have some questions about that.
All right. Then I got a lot of information for you about the Life Map breakfast, so take some notes if you need it. It's going to be November 12th from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. here at Journey. But before we get to that Life Map breakfast, we have packets in the back. You can see them back there, and they have just different instructions and exercises that we can use to reflect on our lives, and it's just in order to grasp the arc of your life, and so you can use the Life Map to gain an overview of your life, or just to focus on specific themes like hardships, joys, dreams, or whatever God leads you to. So this can look different for every person in here. There's not one right or wrong way to do it, but the packet kind of has some suggestions and ideas to help you just explore that and take some time with God to see where he leads you to it. So everyone who is planning on attending needs to complete the project beforehand. So show up with it done already, and then we can kind of share that with each other. And there's a link in the e-news email that you can sign up for. So go ahead and fill that out so they know how many people to prepare for. And if you have any questions, you can talk to Cecil. And then the big give is coming up. So if you know someone in our community that's in need of help this holiday season, submit their information using the link in the e-news, or you can talk to Sue directly as well. But the deadline for that is coming up. It's next Monday, November 7th. So be sure that you get that in if you have someone in mind, or if God's kind of brought someone to your heart. And then lastly, Cecil and Sue will be available up front for anyone who would like to come up and pray.
That's it. We're excited to spend Sunday with y'all.
We stand and worship together.
Oh my, that the highest King will welcome me. I was lost, but he brought me. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me.
Good morning. My name is Michael. This is my wife, Allie. If you haven't met us before, we are friends of Cecil and Sue's, and come around here every now and then to help lead worship. And just really glad we get to sing with you this morning. It's always awesome to get to sing with you. And I really wish I would have known that I could wear a costume to church on Sunday. So Cecil didn't tell me. So I would have been Batman. So that would have been awesome. So, but this next song is one that just declares that God is holy, that there's no one like him. And so we're just going to continue to sing this morning together as the body. Sing worthy.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Sing Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Sing holy, holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I sing Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me.
I will build my life.
And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. These are 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. These are 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
There's no shadow that God won't light up. There's no mountain He won't climb up coming after us. There's no wall He won't kick down or lie He won't tear down in pursuit of us. Lord, we express our gratitude to You for that this morning, that You love us so much. There's no barrier You won't go through. There's nothing You won't break through in pursuit of us.
Amen. Before you sit down, do me a favor, turn to somebody, tell them you're glad they're here this morning. All right. So, welcome. If you're newer around here, or you're coming back from last week, you go, okay, something's different, right? Yep. We have some new equipment. And if you're a regular around here, you're going, how do we have new equipment? Because I saw the last budget report. So let me explain something. The association, right before COVID hit, we were actually in the market. We were going to redo our whole sound system because it was a sound system we had had for years. It spent 8 years in a trailer. Those of you who were with us in the school days, it sat out in the hot, in the cold, and everything, and they were worn out, those speakers. But that COVID hit, we didn't have the funds for it anymore. And recently, one of the association of churches that we belong to decided to inject some money into our churches for the specific purpose of coming out of COVID and trying to get some things built back up. And so, thankfully, the changes you're seeing right now are totally paid for. Yeah, that's cool. You can clap for that. You can clap for that. Those of you who are going, we don't understand what's different, don't worry about it. It just sounds a lot better in here this week. Michael, there were 4 or 5 of us yesterday, spent all day yesterday up here. I appreciate everybody's help. Michael is in the team. They helped, and Todd and these guys back here in TJ. But I've been told that they mounted the speakers behind me so that I would preach to myself first and then you. So we'll see how this works. So it may or may not. I just hope they don't fall on me, but that's a whole nother story. So here we are. We're in a series. We've called this series We Are Family because we're talking about the way God talks about himself, the way he's revealed himself to the world. There's all of these relational terms and things that he talks about when he reveals himself to us. And so we kind of been looking at this and having this conversation as we understand more and more about what he wants from us and with us. I was thinking this last week, actually on Monday, I had one of those moments. I have a lot of voices in my head, okay? I don't know if you do, and maybe you don't, that's okay. I do, and my voices are like this. Like one voice will say one side of the conversation, and another voice will answer. Anybody do that? And then there might be a third or fourth voice that start answering with all these other inputs. And so last Monday, I'm having this conversation in my head about last Sunday. I'm just thinking through what happened here, what was going on, what I said to you. And at some point in time, the voices got so loud that I literally said, I know, out loud. I said that out loud. I totally did it. I own it. That's just, and I do this often, okay? It's not unusual for me. I hope you don't have a ton of voices in your head. I hope you have one dominant voice, because it gets a little confusing, right, when all those voices are speaking up. But here's the thing. What we've looked at so far is that there are at least two dominant voices in our world. There's two dominant voices, and there's two dominant stories that those voices are telling us. And those voices can often be influenced by outside events, experiences, not just family and friends, right? We have those voices in our heads. We have the voices of our kids, our spouse, right? Other relationships, maybe your neighbors are in your head somehow. But there's all these experiences that will happen too, right? And they can create voices in our heads. Lately, we've tried to focus on just these two voices, though. These two stories that really exist in the world we live in. One voice, the voice of God. The voice of God who created us, who spoke everything into existence, and then looked out and said, while we were naked and without shame, everything's really good, and you're with me in this journey. That's one voice, that's one story. But there's this other voice that shows up, and we actually started following that voice, and that voice said, no, wait a minute. And once we started following it, we became naked with shame without God, right? And it's interesting because with those dominant voices, nothing has really changed about who God created us to be. Genesis 5 says this. This is the book of generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. How did he create us? Yeah, there you go. There you go. Some of you are going to get it. Yep. Yeah. I did highlight it in case you're lost. It's right up there. We're created in the likeness of God. And when you become aware of this voice, when you become aware of this story, it makes it much easier to then pay attention to the second voice that came on the scene in Genesis 3. But it's so funny because look at this second voice. The serpent, he says to the woman and to the man, you're surely not going to die. In fact, when you eat, when you disobey, when you do this thing, here's what's going to happen. You're going to be like God. Now, what's the problem with that? We were already like God. That's who we were created to be like. I love Erwin McManus, the pastor out in California. He says, somehow the serpent convinced them that they were not what they already were. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but he shows up and that's what he does. He convinces us that we're not who we were already created to be. And since that time, now here's the deal. Since that time, I can hear my breath through this thing. You guys hear that? It's just like, it's fantastic. Since that time, yeah, the squirrel, thank you. He is not lying. Sometimes the squirrels get out. Since that time, since creation, there's been these two voices. The voice of God who said everything is very, very good. Now, the fall happened, right? Sin enters the world. But that's not the problem. The problem is this other voice that comes along and brings shame into our lives. And so we started talking about shame the last couple of weeks. We said there's a good shame, there really is. We call it guilt or conviction. It's the voice of God who reaches out to us and says, hey, something's off in your life. You're deviating from the path. You're deviating from a relationship with me. You're deviating from walking with me all the time. And that voice is there. And that voice will always say something like, you did something wrong towards somebody else. Whether it's God or ourselves or our friends or relatives or neighbors. But there's that bad voice, that bad shame, right? We call it toxic shame. It comes from outside of us. It's imposed by other people onto us. And it tends to lead us into just desperate isolation. That voice is going to say, you're a bad person. And there's a difference. The voice of God's going to say, listen, you did something bad, but I'm still here with you. This other voice comes along and says, no, you're a bad person. And that is the difference. So the question is, whose voice are you listening to? Because that toxic voice is going to get you to do this. Hey, I'm not good enough at fill in the blank, whatever it is. That toxic voice is always going to say this to you. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not lovable. Nobody wants you. God's voice is always going to lead you back to Him. God's voice is never going to condemn your essence as a person. He doesn't condemn us. In fact, He pursues us in spite of our shame. It doesn't matter how bad you think you've been. It doesn't matter how bad you think you have done things in this life, how much you've messed up. He's still pursuing you. He's still pursuing me. So this morning, for just a second, let's talk a little bit more about that this shame and what the answer is to those voices. And I'm going to start by taking us to, we're going to go to two stories. One of them we'll hit very, very quickly towards the end in John. But the first one I want to start out with is in 1 Kings 18. So if you got a Bible, you can go there. This is the story of Elijah the prophet. I love this story. If you don't know, though, let's kind of recap some things, because you have to know how the Old Testament works to really understand this story. So the God is establishing his nation. This is not because Israel showed up on the scene and God showed up and he goes, hey, man, they're really good people. Let's use them. Has nothing to do with how Israel behaved or anything they had done. God needed a people because he was going to establish a nation and reveal himself to the world through this little group of people. I actually tend to think he chose the Israelites possibly because they were kind of a small nation. I don't know for sure, but I tend to wonder, why did he choose them? He could have chosen anybody else, but he didn't. It was simply by his grace he chose a group of people. They weren't more special than anybody else. They weren't better than everybody else in the world. But he said, I want to have a relationship with you. And as he did that, he started setting up boundaries. We call them laws. Sometimes you call them rules, guidelines, the things that we like to push against sometimes. He didn't do it so that you would just go learn all of the rules and learn all the laws and then just methodically walk them out. He did it because he was teaching us about himself. He was getting us ready for redemption to come on the scene through his son, right? This is the whole thing that's happening in the Old Testament. It's moving us towards something and teaching us about God. He is there and revealing himself through this nation. So when you set up things like temple worship in the Old Testament, we don't do it the same way today, right? But back then it was very strict, very rigid. Why? Because he was teaching us about himself through all of those little things. All the way it was measured and laid out. The way the bowls and everything is set up on the altar. Everything referenced something as he taught us about himself. And he wanted the nation of Israel to show that to the whole world. Now here's what happens. A guy named Ahab comes on the scene. Ahab becomes king of the nation. Ahab becomes a wicked king. He eventually married a girl named Jezebel. Anybody have somebody named Jezebel in your family? Raise your hand. I was willing to bet my life savings that nobody in here would, but I don't have that much, so I'm going to hold on to that. He marries a gal named Jezebel, and you, if you've never heard this story, you automatically know what? She's bad, right? We just know that's her name. We don't name anybody Jezebel anymore because the name's got a bad rap, and it's from her. She starts to bring in these pagan gods into the Israelite nation. In fact, not just bring them in, she brings Baal and Asherah, and she's moving them into the temple. She's getting the people to start to worship these other gods. Now, this nation has one sole purpose: to bless the world through their relationship with God. This is their walk with God is going to bless the world, and they're starting to deviate. Ahab is letting this happen. In fact, he's encouraging it, taking them in a totally opposite, different direction. Jezebel starts to kill off the prophets of God. She's going to do away with them. She's like, this is not going to last anymore. I want everybody, including these other pagan gods, when they worship. I don't care if you worship your God, but you got to worship mine too. And so she's bringing them in. So Ahab does something. He sent to all the people of Israel, and he gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. He's pulling them together because Jezebel wants to just finish them off. She wants to kill everybody. And Elijah came near to all the people, and he said, how long are you going to go limping between two different opinions? You're listening to two different voices. Elijah's got the voice of God. He's telling the people, hey, you need to be following God. This is the way God wants us to follow him. But there's a whole group of other people listening to Ahab and Jezebel, and they're following these pagan gods. Elijah's trying to warn them. He says, if the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. Now he's going to gather about 450 prophets of Baal along with these people. And if you've never read the story, it's quite a big showdown that's going to happen. He's going to challenge God. They're both going to challenge their gods. And the prophets of Baal are gonna beg their gods to come down in fire and destroy this altar. And they spend all day dancing and cutting themselves and chattering and screaming. And Elijah's kind of doing the thing that I would probably do. He's going, I think your God's asleep. I think he's on vacation. You know, he's adding the little extra jab in there, and that sounds like me a little bit. And he's doing this, and then finally enough is enough, and he sets up and he calls down God. And God comes down in just this magnificent way. And fire destroys the altar, consumes everything. Big showdown. Go read it this week if you've never, ever read it. But here's the thing. It has nothing to do with just all these rules. It has nothing to do with Elijah knowing the right rules and doing all this. It's this relationship he has with God that allows all of this to come to happen. And Elijah is trying to teach the people. He's trying to reach out to them. He's trying to get them to pay attention. And he knows this is what God wants. See, it's a nation we're dealing with here. It's a nation. This is not the way we deal with people today, because what happens next is terrible. Elijah says to the people, seize the prophets of Baal. After God destroys the altar, he turns around and he's like, okay, now grab the 450 prophets of Baal. Let not one of them escape. So they seized them, and then Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon, and he slaughtered them there. Now, this is one of those hard passages. If you read this passage and you think, yes, God got the victory. We need this God today. If you think like that, you're thinking wrong. This is not what was intended here. This is a horrible scene. This should make you squirm just a little bit. This should make you cringe. 450 people lost their lives. 450 voices were silenced. This is not about how we deal with enemies today. Remember I said the Old Testament's different. The Old Testament wasn't just written for us. The Old Testament was written for a whole different time. Now we read it and we understand it, and God reveals himself and talks to us through it. But this is a different time. This is not an outline for how we should launch a new political party in this country. That's not what's going on here. So it should make you cringe. It should make you squirm just a little bit. But can you imagine what's going on in Elijah's head in this moment? They kill these prophets. God has just come down, fire, boom, rains it down, just because Elijah called him and asked him to do it. Then he gathers the prophets. They're outnumbered probably a little bit, but they slay these prophets. He's the man of God. He's the man of the hour. Ahab goes and he tells Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how the prophets had killed, how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. And then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, watch this, I love this statement. This makes no sense to me. So may the gods do to me and more also if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Think about what she just said. She's talking to her gods. The gods that didn't show up, the gods that didn't bring fire down, the gods that didn't do anything at the last big event, 8 hours dancing around, cutting ourselves, and they didn't do anything. And now she's going to make a definitive declaration, a statement of war. She says, may my gods do to me. Well, your gods haven't done anything. And that's what she's relying on. Now, as Elijah's hearing this, what do you think he's saying to himself? What would the voice in your head be? Then he was afraid. And he arose and he ran for his life, and he came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. Elijah runs. He starts to listen to the other voice, the man of the hour, the guy who's just called down fire, who seems to have God's attention right now. God is doing what Elijah asked. They're walking together in sync. He understands why the nation of Israel needs to get rid of these people. It's not because they're just out to kill people. It's because these people are setting out to destroy God's plan. They're going to pollute God's temple. God says, I can't allow this. This is how you're going to get to know me. This is how my redemption plan is going to come into the world. Jesus is going to come through this lineage. This has to happen. I'm not going to tolerate this other stuff. It's not about us making war today. It's about what God was doing with the nation right then. And Elijah knows this. He knows that's the dominant voice. He knows that's the dominant story. And what does he do? He runs. He's been the man of the hour. He's called down fire. 450 prophets of Baal are dead. And the voice of one woman sends him running. I'll let that sit for a second. There's a whole lot I'd say, but I'm not going to, for fear that the squirrels will get out, okay? The other voices might come out. He runs, he plops down under a tree, and this is the amazing thing. He plops down under a tree, and he doesn't even say, I'm going to kill myself. He plops down under a tree, and he says, God, just take me. Like it seems like he's getting a little lazy about it now. He's like, I'm not even going to kill myself. I'm just going to plop down, and I'm going to say, hey, God, just take me. I'm ready to die. This is no good. He's the man of the hour. He's had massive success. Have you ever done that? Like had one of those days where it's like you've had this highest of high type of experience with God at some point. Just something happened. Maybe it's just something that you're just happy to be alive. You know, you've been out in nature. Maybe you saw something. God reminded you of something. You're just happy to be alive. You're having this highest of high, and then all of a sudden something else happens, and what? You have this really low experience. This other voice comes along. This other voice starts to say something to you, and you start to listen to it. God comes onto the scene. He says, Elijah, what are you doing here? He literally asks him, hey, what are you doing here? And Elijah's response is just classic. He goes, everybody has disobeyed. Everybody has disobeyed. I'm the only one left standing for you, God. I'm the only one left. Remember what we've been talking about with shame? What does it do? It isolates. It gets you to start to isolate yourself, start to get alone to yourself. Elijah's like listening to this other voice. All of a sudden he thinks, I'm all alone. No one can relate to me. No one understands what I'm going through. No one can help me. Do you hear that? That's toxic shame. This is a guy who's walked very close to God. This is why we do relationship together and we start to watch out for one another, because it's really easy for any of us to actually start to listen to the wrong voice. And our lives will start to go off path, move away from God when we don't want it to. He says, I'm all alone. Toxic shame. Last Tuesday, 19-year-old man walked into his ex-high school in St. Louis with a gun, opened fire, killed at least 2. I don't know if you saw it. He left a note. I want to read you a portion of his note. He said, I don't have any friends. I don't have any family. I've never had a girlfriend. I've never had a social life. I have been an isolated loner my entire life. Toxic shame. Toxic shame. Look, we can fight about all these things and these rules and these laws. We're about to go look at the Pharisees, and they do this. But the thing is people are desperate to know that they are valuable. We've left the original script. We've left the original voice. We were intended to walk with God. We were intended to, in our imaginations, be able to come up with stuff and then create stuff like God created us. We were created to be this kind of people.